My name is Daniel Hess. I'm a father of 6, ages 3 to 17. I write under the popular pronatalist account, More Births. Fertility is crashing, and this is very likely the greatest challenge humanity is facing. So here's a map of global fertility. Birth rates are below replacement in almost every country and falling more every year, and a lot of people feel helpless. This problem is much worse than it seems because it is hitting the core countries of the global system the hardest. Population collapse will be most severe for the countries that invent the most, the countries that build most of what we need. Everything from the tiny microchips that power AI to the giant container ships that power world trade are made by countries with a TFR below 1 birth per woman. What is causing fertility collapse? Everyone has a different answer, and many people declare that it's a mystery. Nobody knows what's going on. With fertility, everyone's mind seeks one silver bullet, a skeleton key that opens all doors. But this is a big, multifaceted problem, and we need to think about solutions in a multifactored way. A lot of things have to happen to have children. You need to have a cultural drive to have children. That's a big one. You want to get done with education. Most people want a committed partner for the 20-plus year project of raising children. You need housing, especially something that is suitable for a family, a way to support the family financially, and a plan for childcare. And all this has to happen early enough in life because fertility is highest in the 20s and early 30s. With modern birth control, most people don't just have kids because sex is fun. Now a whole bunch of things have to line up, and you see this strongly in the data. If you take all the research that exists on fertility, and if you look within and across populations, there are a number of strong fertility factors that show up repeatedly with a strong statistical support and pretty good agreement across demography. They line up nicely with the things that people say they want to have children. In demography, perfect proof is impossible because you can't run randomized controlled trials with people's lives. There are many confounders, but though demography is not like physics, we still know a great deal. I call this set of factors the fertility stack. As far as I know, nobody has ever presented the fertility factors all together like this, so this is a big deal. I can't take credit for this discovery. It is just a compilation, but having a system is crucial to solving a problem at scale. Credit goes to the Institute for Family Studies and Lyman Stone's hundreds of demographic researchers who have gathered and crunched lots of data, and all of you who help us think about this. With that in mind, here is my view of the major factors at play. The fertility stack, following the data without fear or favor. Now, I already said there is not a single factor driving fertility, but several. But if there's one factor that holds it all together, one ring to rule them all, a culture that is a culture that believes strongly in having children. I was going to talk first about the remarkable case of pronatal Mongolia, but we had another presenter on that. I will just emphasize that encouraging families by national leaders has visible and profound differences, and the fertility in Mongolia is 3 times what it is in neighboring China. One has had pronatal attitudes for the last 70 years. The other has had antenatal messaging for most of that time. We see a 3-fold difference. This is dramatic and strong evidence of the power of a pronatal culture. So let's look now at Israel. Of the 38 countries in the OECD, Israel is the only one that has above replacement fertility at nearly 3 births per woman. But Israel is crowded and housing is extremely expensive. Women's education is higher than men's. It is high tech. So by all these metrics, Israel's fertility is supposed to be low. Israel is religious, and that's a part of the story, but plenty of religious countries like Italy and Greece have very low fertility. The factor that drives high Israeli fertility among the religious and secular alike is that Israeli culture places an extraordinary importance on having children. That seems too simple, but I promise it is true. This fact is reported by almost everyone who has studied Israel's remarkable fertility. In the recent war, when Israel's soldiers died, teams of doctors rushed out to the field to retrieve their sperm so their widows can still bear their children. That is like 10 times more raw pronatalism than any other country. Brian Kaplan says that if you aren't succeeding at something, you may have to try 10 times as much. That is a good way of thinking about this. The birth rate crisis is solvable, but we have to be 10 times as pronatal. But I think the biggest evidence of the power of pronatal belief comes from its opposite. Following scares about overpopulation after the publication of Paul Ehrlich's The Population Bomb, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Thailand, and more recently Iran had campaigns urging people to have fewer children. These campaigns were immediately effective, causing fertility to plunge virtually overnight. What a culture says directly about having children has extraordinary power. Antinatalists know this well, but pronatalists barely get it. Factor 2, marriage as the ultimate pronatal social technology. Western cultures are deeply tolerant, and that is a good thing. We accept families however they come, and we should. Without the contribution of non-traditional families, fertility would be staggeringly low. And yet marriage is the instrument more than any other through which men and women tie themselves for the long project of raising children. Marriage culture matters tremendously for birth rates. In fact, no country in the world manages to reach replacement fertility with low marriage rates. And this goes a long way to explaining low European fertility despite pronatal policies in many countries. Marriage age matters too. The ability to conceive is highest in the 20s and is quite low by age 40. And so delayed marriage is a big driver of falling fertility. Factor 3, housing suitable for families. It is not only cost. It is axiomatic in demography. When countries urbanize, fertility falls. The lowest fertility rates in the world, between 0.4 and 0.7 births per woman, are seen in dense cities like Seoul, Shanghai, and Bangkok, each a sea of high-rise apartment towers. Meanwhile, in the suburbs outside of Austin, the TFR is around 2.0 or higher. Some claim that the problem is cost. It turns out that fertility, the next chart is equally important. It turns out fertility is inversely proportional, related to the proportion that live in apartments all over the world. With housing in the form of apartments, you get very tiny family sizes. Only around 5% of births in Seoul are a third birth or higher, and only 0.6% are a fourth birth or more. The percentages in the United States are 30% and 13%, respectively. Single-family homes, by contrast, are associated with much higher fertility. America's baby boom coincided with a huge housing transformation, as America went from being a nation of urban renters to a nation of suburban homeowners. We need to build much more housing that is affordable for young people. But as Asia shows us, cheap housing of the wrong type doesn't help fertility and probably makes things worse. Housing, once built, lasts a long time, and if it is poorly suited for families, it will drag down fertility for generations. Factor 4, faith, the biggest source of pronatal values. Religiosity, and especially religious attendance, is strongly associated with higher birth rates. Almost every high fertility group one can think of, from the Amish and traditional Catholics in the United States to the Laestadian Lutherans in Finland to Orthodox Jews all over the world, have a religious basis. There are several reasons for this. Transcendent values, cultural practices like saving yourself for marriage and more, but also Abrahamic faiths have higher fertility because of teachings that urge people to have children, such as go forth and multiply. Buddhism lacks such teachings, and Buddhist fertility is low. It matters greatly what faith leaders teach about family. Famously, the Patriarch of Georgia was able to spark a baby boom by celebrating large families. Lyman Stone had a wonderful paper on that. Okay, so I named 12 birth rate factors, and that was the 4 biggest ones. But we have limited time, so I will speed run through the rest. Factor 5, money. Why is it that as we get richer, fertility falls? That is the opposite of what economists expect. When you're richer, you can afford more kids. My best explanation, education, and then work are greedy on time and compete with family. That is partly why very work-focused countries like South Korea and Poland have ultra-low fertility. And work competes hardest with family for women. For men, income makes them more attractive. So the relationship between income and fertility is opposite for men and women. If one person can stay at home when the kids are small, that helps. But work from home can resolve that conflict, and so work from home is extremely pronatal in the data. And that chart is by Lyman Stone with millions of people in the survey. Factor 6, bridging the gender divide. There's a huge problem of coupling. And I can't get to it all here. But if women are doing it all, work and family being 2 jobs, and men aren't doing enough, that is a huge problem. Meanwhile, on the other side, there is a huge dating app mismatch with many women having expectations that are too high. So women need to soften those expectations. So factors 7 and 8, relaxed parenting and kids leaving the nest. So parenting should not be so insanely hard. And here, another hat tip to Brian Kaplan. A lot is out of your control, so don't make it hard and have more fun. Also, kids have to leave the nest. This is incredibly strong in the data. You don't have a lot of riz when you're living in mom's basement, but also learning to take care of and support yourself is a big step toward parenthood. In the data, getting out on your own is a huge factor. Factor 9, limiting elective C-sections. Something that most people don't know is that a high rate of elective C-sections is associated with low fertility, and the causes are clear. More scar tissue in the uterus, longer waits between pregnancies, plus doctors tell people to have fewer children with C-sections. Meanwhile, doctors are incentivized to do more C-sections than necessary. Israel, notably, fixed their incentives to equalize the financial compensation between C-sections and natural births and fixed this problem. Factor 10, education. So there are 2 things that I want to talk about here. First, you have to get antenatal propaganda out of schools. A crazy thing that most people don't know is that Paul Ehrlich's own organization, Population Connection, has been active in schools. Second, kids need to learn about the fertility window while in high school. Fecundability, which is the ability to get pregnant, is younger than any of us knew. Sex ed is almost overwhelming, is 100% focused on helping people to avoid pregnancy, but not focused at all on helping people to have the children that they want to have. Factors 11 and 12. So factor 11, much larger family norms. A huge share of the population will be childless, perhaps more than a third, for a ton of very difficult reasons. So if the norm is 2 kids for the rest, you will have a TFR of 1.33, which is what we see all over the developed world. You need a norm of at least 3 just to get to replacement. And that is how we historically were. So factor 12, policy. Policy can work. I don't dwell on that because there are others that are doing that already, but France is a great example. Here is a map by Lyman Stone of the border regions in the south of France, in the borders with Spain and Italy. This isn't immigrants. The demographics are reasonably similar across the borders, but we can see very strongly that French pronatal policy does make a big difference. So that's the fertility stack. Dilbert cartoonist Scott Adams has the concept of a talent stack where the more different skills you have, the more successful you will be. The fertility stack is like that. No person or society will have all of the elements, but the more you have, the higher fertility will be. If you can get 0.2 here and 0.3 there, soon society can be at replacement or even well above it. We need to systematize fertility studies like economics so that every educated person knows the basics of what drives family formation. Let's build a system of knowledge and make the future bright again. So I have a big publication released for this NatalCon on these fertility factors in collaboration with one of the top demographers in the world, Paul Moreland, who has written 3 books on demography. I made a bunch of copies, and it is downloadable as well at morebirths.com, and I hope everyone can have a look, far more detail than I have time for here. Thanks, and I really appreciate everyone, and I really want to emphasize on just that this is a collaborative effort. We do need to systematize this, think about it logically, and I think we need to have a collaborative, complete project here. Yes. Well, I do have something on sperm counts, and I have an article. If you look on my More Births Twitter, if you look on the articles tab, I do actually address that. So I have considered that. I don't think that's also not a factor that we understand well or we have easy control over, I think. But I do want to emphasize that this is my best estimate at this time, but this is an ongoing project. We need to systematize this. There needs to be a basic underlying ground level knowledge that everybody needs to understand these different factors as kind of foundational, as a foundational thing. And this is a collaborative project. We can add to it, and different people will have their views of what the most important factors are. But the point is to have a broad understanding. Thank you very much. Oh, you got another? Well, I do think that there is a lack of like a comprehensive understanding, and one thing I'm going to talk about in the debate with Brian Kaplan is, something that Japan has been doing like crazy is it has been urbanizing and building up Tokyo to an extreme degree, and everybody is living in tiny apartments now, where Japan was once a nation of single-family homes. It's not that anymore for young people. All young people overwhelmingly are moving to tiny apartments in Tokyo. That's a factor that plays into things in Japan. But this kind of a stack is an excellent way to analyze a particular country or a particular place and find out what bottlenecks are existing with that particular place. But again, I do want to emphasize the culture, as I tried to put it at the very top, the sense of belief about family, belief about children is what I put at the very top of that stack. So, thank you.